So here's a few things that'll help make your glue ups go a little bit easier. The first thing is to start with a flat surface. I've got a nice flat work table. I put a little craft paper over the top of that to protect that from drips. If you don't have a nice work table like this, your table saw works just as well. And again, make sure that you cover that to protect it. And as far as clamps goes, any clamps will work. Here's an example of a pipe clamp. This is a favorite used by a lot of woodworkers. The only concern I have with these is that they are somewhat unstable. There are plans available, and you can find them to provide a little more support on the bottom to keep these clamps sitting a little bit flatter and a little bit less tippy on the table. I really enjoy bar clamps like these that sit flat on a surface. My feeling is if I have a flat surface and I've got a clamp that sits flat on that surface and boards that sit flat on a clamp, it gives me a much better chance of getting up a flat glue up when I'm done. Now, it's also a good idea to have some fresh glue on hand. Please don't use old glue. Glue that's been around much more than a year or so is just not as fresh as it should be. A nice fresh tube of glue will go well for you, especially if you've spent so much time and energy and money on putting a project together. Don't use something that's that old. Now, a dry glue up is a good way to start. This will show you where all of your potential problems are coming from. You'll notice in here what I can do is take my boards and put them in the clamps, and I'll spread my clamps about this far. Now, once I've done that too, I do want to protect the clamp edges from excess glue. I protected the table, and I think it's important to protect the clamps too. If you notice on the front here, there's a little bit of glue on the base of this clamp. These little serrated edges are what allows this clamp to hold well, and buildups of glue can cause a problem there. So once I've got my clamps somewhat set up to where I know that they're going to be, all I need to do is take a couple of pieces of painter's tape like this and protect those edges too. Any glue drip ups then will not get stuck on the clamp, and secondarily there's no chance to mark the bottom edge of that glue up with any kind of the metal residue that comes from the bottom side of that clamp reacting with the glue. So here's our 3 boards set this way. And lastly, you can see that our clamps are set about 12 inches apart or so. With boards about 4 inches wide, the clamping pressure is spread pretty well with just 2 clamps spaced about 12 inches apart. So I only need 2 for this. Now, there's no hard and fast rule. Normally, the wider the boards, the wider the spacing of the clamps can be. The narrower the boards, the more clamps you'll need to be able to provide that same spread of glue. As far as the number of boards to use in a glue up, I prefer to do just 3. 3 boards gives me only 2 seams that I have to control. And with my fingers and my thumb, I can kind of feel the edge of those, so as I tighten the clamps, I can keep them aligned perfectly. When I'm done with a glue up like that, I have almost nothing that I have to sand off. When you're doing multiple boards, 5 or 6 boards, as you work your way down through the clamps, it's much harder to keep all those edges aligned. And if you're off just a 1/16 of an inch on any one of those edges on a multiple board glue up, it means you have to remove a 1/16 on one side and a 1/16 on the other side. You've reduced your 3/4 inch clamp up to something down to 5/8 by the time you're done. So I prefer to use just 3. Now you've got your boards laid out, it's time to put glue on them. And here's how I like to apply it. I put glue on just one edge of the board, like this. And then using my finger, I'll evenly spread that glue across the face of that board. And then to spread the glue to the other one, all I'm going to do is take these 2 edges and rub them together. And that brings glue onto both of them. And I'll do the same on this side. The same way. And the reason I'm doing this is because by adding glue this way to both sides, you don't have an excess amount of glue. That will provide a real nice glue line. So our glue is all applied. Let's put our boards in position and slide the clamps into line. And now it's time to align these edges. I'm going to use my finger and my thumb to control the alignment between each one of these 3 boards. Remember, there's only 2 seams. And I'm going to slowly tighten the clamps till I get them in those spots. So there we are there. And kind of follow it down the board like this until you're even here. So we feel pretty nice. Now our boards are close, and now all I have to do is put a half turn on either clamp. Now what you'll notice is the glue is beginning to bead up in spots here, and that's what I want. I want individual beads of glue and not a big mess of glue all over. I don't want a big pool of glue. It's time now, before you finalize this, to make sure that the board is sitting flat on the clamps and the clamps are flat on the table. And a quick look will assure me that all those edges meet very well. Now let's talk a little bit more about that pressure. I told you just a half a turn on each of these clamps was plenty. Talking to the glue manufacturers, we find that what it takes is about 175 pounds of pressure to push the glue into the edges of the boards on either side and provide the glue line down there that they feel is appropriate. Clamps like these can generate anywhere from 1,000 to 1,250 pounds of pressure. Clamps like this, anywhere from 450 to 600 pounds. Both of those more than enough pressure to push this together, and by over-tightening these, we just make the glue line thinner. In fact, really over-tightening these can sometimes make the whole glue-up bow. So just enough pressure will work. Remember, these boards fit together so nicely by hand pressure, jointed at 90 degrees, that it only takes a little bit of pressure to provide the perfect glue-up. Don't over-tighten.